There are great players, and then there are players who make even other great players question themselves. Throughout a remarkable career that lasted more than 2 decades, Ray Bourque skated against some of the most talented hockey players ever to step onto NHL ice. He faced legends during the golden years of the league, men whose names still echo through arenas and hockey conversations decades later. As one of the greatest defensemen in history, Bourque rarely appeared intimidated. Fans in Boston grew accustomed to seeing him calmly shut down the league's biggest stars night after night. Yet even someone as accomplished as Bourque understood that certain opponents were different. These were not simply players who scored goals or collected trophies. They were players who changed the atmosphere of a game the moment they jumped over the boards. Coaches adjusted strategies because of them. Teammates became more alert because of them. Entire arenas seemed to hold their breath whenever they touched the puck. Some possessed extraordinary skill. Others combined talent with relentless determination. A few had the rare ability to make even the best defensemen feel one step behind. When Ray Bourque looks back on his career today, he remembers thousands of games, countless battles, and unforgettable playoff wars. But among all those memories, a handful of opponents stand above the rest. These were the players who demanded his absolute best every single shift. The players who forced him to think faster, skate harder, and compete at a level few others could inspire. They came from different teams, different cities, and different eras, but they shared one thing in common. They were the toughest NHL players Ray Bourque ever faced. And the player who ultimately claimed the top spot may not be the name many fans expect. Before discussing the players who challenged him most, it is important to understand the man making these choices. Ray Bourque was born on December 28, 1960, in Saint Laurent, Quebec, Canada. From the moment he entered the NHL with the Boston Bruins in 1979, it became clear that hockey was witnessing something special. Unlike many defensemen of his era, Bourque could dominate both ends of the ice. He defended with intelligence, moved the puck with precision, and contributed offensively at a level that few defensemen had ever achieved. Over 22 NHL seasons, Bourque became the face of the Bruins franchise and one of the most respected athletes in professional sports. He won 5 Norris trophies as the league's best defenseman and established records that stood for years. More importantly, he earned admiration from teammates, opponents, coaches, and fans alike. His consistency was almost impossible to believe. Season after season, regardless of injuries, roster changes, or playoff disappointments, Bourque remained one of the league's elite players. What made Bourque unique was his perspective. He competed against multiple generations of stars. He faced the high-flying offensive explosion of the 1980s, the physical intensity of the 1990s, and the evolving speed of the modern NHL. Few players in hockey history experienced such a wide range of opponents at the highest level. That gives his opinions special weight. When Ray Bourque identifies the toughest players he ever faced, he is speaking from experience that spans some of the greatest eras the sport has ever known. The first name on his list was a player who seemed determined to win every battle, every shift, and every game he played. Number 5. Mark Messier, the leader who refused to lose. Whenever Ray Bourque faced Mark Messier, he knew the game would become a battle long before the final horn sounded. There were more gifted scorers in the NHL. There were faster skaters and flashier stars. But very few players combined skill, toughness, intelligence, and leadership the way Messier did. What made him so difficult was that he seemed capable of influencing every area of the game at once. Bourque first encountered Messier during an era when the NHL was overflowing with talent. The league featured legendary names on nearly every roster, yet Messier consistently stood apart. Standing strong through contact and thriving under pressure, he possessed a style that forced defensemen into uncomfortable situations. If they played him physically, he welcomed the challenge. If they gave him space, he used it to create offense. There never seemed to be a perfect answer. What impressed Bourque most was Messier's ability to elevate his game when the stakes became highest. Many players performed brilliantly during the regular season. Messier often became even better in crucial moments. He carried himself with a confidence that spread throughout his team. Opponents could feel that confidence as well. Even when his team trailed, Messier played as though victory remained inevitable. The playoff battles between Boston and Edmonton provided some of Bourque's most vivid memories. Every shift required complete concentration. Messier was constantly moving, constantly communicating, constantly looking for weaknesses. He was not merely trying to score goals. He was trying to impose his will on the entire game. That mentality made him exhausting to play against over the course of a series. There was also a physical side to Messier that often gets overlooked by younger fans. He could deliver punishing hits and absorb punishment without losing effectiveness. He played through pain, played through pressure, and rarely seemed rattled. Bourque admired competitors who embraced difficult situations, and few embraced them more completely than Messier. Years later, many players would remember Messier's championships, trophies, and leadership. Bourque remembered something slightly different. He remembered how difficult it was to keep him under control for 60 minutes. No matter how well a defenseman played, Messier always found a way to create problems. Yet despite all his strengths, Messier was not the most talented offensive force Bourque ever faced. The next player on the list possessed a combination of speed, determination, and skill that made him one of the most respected captains in NHL history. He was a player who never stopped working no matter how successful he became. That player was Steve Yzerman. Number 4, Steve Yzerman, the captain who never stopped coming. When Ray Bourque faced athlete, he was facing far more than a superstar center. He was facing one of the most complete competitors the NHL had ever produced. What made Yzerman so difficult was not a single skill. It was the fact that he seemed to possess every skill a player could need, and he knew exactly when to use each one. Early in his career, Yzerman was known primarily as an offensive machine. He scored goals at an incredible pace and could take over games with his creativity. Defensemen already struggled to contain him because of his skating and vision. But as the years passed, he evolved into something even more dangerous. Instead of focusing only on offense, he transformed himself into a complete player who could dominate every situation on the ice. That transformation left a lasting impression on Bourque. Many stars become comfortable once they establish themselves among the league's elite. Yzerman chose a different path. He continued improving long after most players would have been satisfied. He became stronger defensively, smarter positionally, and even more effective as a leader. By the time the Detroit Red Wings became a powerhouse in the 1990s, Yzerman had become one of the most difficult matchups in hockey. Bourque often spoke about the challenge of defending players who never seemed to panic. Yzerman fit that description perfectly. Whether Detroit was leading by 3 goals or trailing by 2, he remained composed. He rarely wasted energy. He rarely forced plays that were not available. Instead, he patiently waited for opportunities and then attacked with precision. The battles between Boston and Detroit were intense because Yzerman never gave opponents a moment to relax. Even when he was not scoring, he was influencing the game. He killed penalties, won faceoffs, blocked shots, and created opportunities for teammates. Bourque understood how valuable that kind of player could be because he approached the game in a similar way himself. What made Yzerman especially frustrating was his relentless determination. Some players could be discouraged after a difficult shift or a hard hit. Yzerman seemed to become stronger. Every challenge only increased his focus. Every setback appeared to motivate him. For Bourque, that mentality separated great players from legendary ones. Yzerman's talent was undeniable, but his commitment to winning was what truly made him dangerous. Night after night, year after year, he forced opponents to earn every inch of ice. Still as impressive as Yzerman was, there was another player whose size, strength, and puck control created problems unlike anything Bourque had ever experienced. This next player could make elite defensemen look helpless while carrying the puck through traffic as if nobody else were on the ice. That player was Jaromir Jagr. Number 3. Jaromir Jagr, the impossible man to move. There were moments when Ray Bourque did everything correctly and still could not stop Jaromir Jagr. For a defenseman, that is one of the most frustrating feelings imaginable. You take away the passing lane, you maintain proper positioning, you force the attacker toward the boards, you make the smart decision, and yet somehow the puck remains on his stick. Against Jagr, that happened more often than Bourque wanted to admit. By the time Jagr entered his prime, the NHL had never seen many players like him. He combined the hands of a skilled playmaker with the body of a power forward. Standing well over 6 feet tall and possessing extraordinary strength, he could protect the puck better than almost anyone in hockey history. Opponents often knew exactly what he wanted to do. The problem was stopping him from doing it. Bourque quickly learned that traditional defensive tactics were not always enough. Most forwards could be pushed off balance or separated from the puck through physical pressure. Jagr seemed to thrive under that pressure. He welcomed contact because contact often allowed him to use his strength. Once he established position along the boards, removing him from the play became incredibly difficult. What made him even more dangerous was his patience. Many elite scorers attack immediately when they see an opening. Jagr was willing to wait. He would hold the puck for an extra second, force defenders to commit, and then exploit the smallest mistake. That patience frustrated opponents because it disrupted their timing and defensive structure. Bourque respected players who could think the game at an elite level, and Jagr certainly qualified. While fans admired the goals and highlights, players often noticed something else. They noticed how rarely Jagr made poor decisions. Every movement appeared calculated. Every possession seemed purposeful. The Pittsburgh Penguins of that era were already filled with talent, but Jagr often felt like a problem that could not be solved. Even when a defenseman limited his opportunities, he only needed one or two chances to change a game. His combination of size, balance, vision, and skill made him unique. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Jagr's game was that he never appeared rushed. The NHL was full of fast players, yet Jagr controlled the pace rather than allowing the pace to control him. That ability gave him an advantage against even the most experienced defenders. For Bourque, facing Jagr required concentration on every shift. One lapse could become a scoring chance. One mistake could become a goal. Yet despite Jagr's extraordinary gifts, two names still remained above him. Both were generational talents whose influence reached far beyond statistics. The next player on Bourque's list was a superstar so dominant that entire defensive systems were built specifically to slow him down. That player was Mario Lemieux. Number 2, Mario Lemieux, the superstar who made hockey look easy. The first thing Ray Bourque noticed about Mario Lemieux was how effortless everything seemed. Most NHL players had to fight for space. They had to work relentlessly to create opportunities. They needed several moves to beat a defender. Lemieux often appeared to accomplish the same things with a single stride, a subtle deke, or one perfectly timed decision. From the outside, it looked easy. For the players trying to stop him, it was anything but. Standing 6 feet 4 inches tall, Lemieux possessed a physical presence that already made him difficult to defend. But what truly separated him from almost everyone else was his combination of size and skill. Hockey history had seen powerful players. It had seen gifted playmakers. It had seen elite goal scorers. Very rarely had it seen all those qualities combined in one player at such an extraordinary level. Bourque spent years studying opponents, identifying tendencies, and learning how to limit the league's biggest stars. Against Lemieux, preparation only went so far. He could beat defenders in ways that were impossible to predict. One shift, he would use his reach to glide around traffic. The next shift, he would thread a pass through an opening that seemed invisible to everyone else. Then he might simply shoot the puck and score before anyone could react. What made Lemieux particularly difficult was his ability to control the game without appearing to force anything. Some superstars attacked with relentless speed. Others relied on physical dominance. Lemieux often looked calm, almost relaxed while dismantling an opposing defense. Bourque understood how rare that was. Many players could create highlights when everything went perfectly. Lemieux created them under pressure. He could take over a game against elite competition and make world-class players look ordinary. There were nights when defenses executed their plans exactly as intended and still watched him finish with multiple points. The respect Bourque had for Lemieux grew even stronger because of the challenges Lemieux faced away from the ice. Despite injuries and serious health battles, he continued producing at a level few athletes in any sport have ever reached. That resilience added another layer to his greatness. For defensemen, there was also a psychological challenge. Every time Lemieux touched the puck, something dangerous felt possible. Players knew they could not relax for even a second. One small opening was all he needed. Years later, Bourque would still describe Lemieux as one of the most gifted hockey players he had ever seen. The combination of talent, size, vision, and creativity was almost impossible to match. And yet one player remained ahead of him. One player forced Ray Bourque to prepare differently than anyone else. One player changed the way hockey was played. One player made even the greatest defensemen spend entire games reacting rather than controlling. That player was Wayne Gretzky. Number 1. Wayne Gretzky, the player who always seemed one step ahead. For most of Ray Bourque's career, stopping great players was part of the job. He built his reputation by shutting down elite scorers, reading plays before they developed, and making life difficult for the NHL's biggest stars. But when the opponent was Wayne Gretzky, the challenge became something entirely different. What made Gretzky so difficult was not his size. It was not his speed. It was not even his shot. It was his mind. Bourque has faced countless Hall of Fame players, but Gretzky possessed a level of hockey intelligence that seemed almost impossible to explain. He often appeared to know where the puck was going before anyone else on the ice. While other players reacted to situations, Gretzky seemed to anticipate them several seconds in advance. That advantage may not sound significant, but at the NHL level, those seconds can decide entire games. Defensemen are trained to read options and eliminate threats. Against Gretzky, new threats seemed to appear constantly. A passing lane that looked closed would suddenly open. A teammate who appeared covered would somehow receive a perfect pass. A harmless situation would transform into a scoring chance in an instant. Bourque quickly realized that traditional defensive approaches often failed against him. If you focused on Gretzky's scoring ability, he would become a playmaker. If you concentrated on taking away passing options, he would find another way to attack. He adapted faster than anyone else. One of Gretzky's most famous strengths was his use of the area behind the net, a space many players ignored before he arrived. Opponents eventually referred to it as Gretzky's office because he operated there with such extraordinary effectiveness. From that position, he could see the ice differently than everyone else. He created opportunities that other players never even considered. For Bourque, the most frustrating aspect was that Gretzky rarely needed many chances. Some stars relied on volume. Gretzky relied on precision. A single mistake could become a goal. A brief lapse in concentration could become an assist. Every shift demanded complete focus. There was also a psychological challenge. Opponents entered games knowing they were facing the best player in hockey, yet even when they prepared perfectly, Gretzky often found a solution. That ability to consistently overcome defensive adjustments separated him from nearly everyone who had ever played the sport. Bourque respected toughness, determination, and physical courage. Gretzky's greatness came from something different. He dominated through understanding. He saw possibilities before anyone else could recognize them. When people discuss the toughest opponents Ray Bourque ever faced, many legendary names deserve consideration. Mark Messier brought relentless leadership. Steve Yzerman combined skill with tireless commitment. Jaromir Jagr used strength and puck control unlike anyone else. Mario Lemieux possessed gifts that seemed almost unfair. But if Bourque had to choose the one player who challenged him more than any other, the answer was Wayne Gretzky. Not because he was bigger, not because he was stronger, because he always seemed one step ahead. Looking back today, Ray Bourque's career serves as a reminder of how fortunate hockey fans were to witness one of the greatest eras in NHL history. The players on this list were not simply stars. They were generational talents who shaped the sport and inspired millions of fans across North America. Each brought a unique challenge. Each forced opponents to reach a higher level. And each left behind a legacy that continues to influence the game decades later. What makes Bourque's perspective so valuable is that he experienced these players firsthand. He was not watching from the stands or analyzing highlights years later. He was battling them shift after shift, season after season, often with championships hanging in the balance. He understood better than almost anyone how difficult it was to compete against athletes of this caliber. The remarkable thing is that Bourque himself belongs in the same conversation. Just as he remembers facing these legends, many of them would likely place Ray Bourque among the toughest opponents they ever encountered. That mutual respect is part of what made hockey's greatest generation so special. Competition was fierce, but admiration often remained. Today, younger fans know these names through statistics, trophies, and old footage. Those who watch them live remember something more. They remember the anticipation every time Gretzky touched the puck. They remember the power of Lemieux, the determination of Yzerman, the strength of Jagr, and the leadership of Messier. They remember an era when every game seemed to feature future Hall of Famers. And perhaps that is the lasting lesson from Ray Bourque's list. Great players earn records. Legendary players earn respect from other legends. Decades after their final games, these men are still remembered not only for what they achieved, but for how difficult they were to stop. In the eyes of Ray Bourque, They were the toughest of the toughest. And that may be one of the highest compliments hockey can offer.